Good morning. Welcome to this morning's session. We have the title, the Developer Preview Data Integration Services. I call it more the road to the integration services. Subtitle, Data Import 3.0 and beyond. My name is Ralf Schundelmeyer. I'm a product manager at Salesforce. I own tools such as Data Import Wizard, Data Loader, Salesforce Connect, the Virtual Entity Framework, and we also, a couple months ago, started working on a new product that probably has been renamed already 3 times. Current working title is Data Integration Services, so don't be surprised if it changes many more times, especially if our marketing team gets their hands on it. A little about me. You can probably tell that I have a funny accent. I grew up in Germany, in a small town called Lahr. And then in '95, I moved to Philadelphia, kind of part of the big SAP boom in those days. Planned to stay for a year. Well, I'm still here. I learned English from Eddie Murphy. You might think that's odd, but for me, I learned English in school, and then I moved here, and I could not understand a word. And HBO had a special, and every night I watched the Eddie Murphy movies that I watched in Germany in German, and after watching the same movie 3 or 4 times, my hearing got much better. Prior to Salesforce, I did about 10 years of startups. Actually, I've been doing software development and product management in the cloud since 2000, which sounds shocking. The cloud was very different then, so we came a long way. And joined Salesforce in 2008. I live in Berkeley, have 2 kids. And my favorite day at work is called Goals Against Hunger. It's a volunteer soccer tournament where we donate money, and then we can pretend for a day to be professional soccer players. And our team actually won the tournament 3 times, but unfortunately this year I missed it. 7 lives. I've worked on many different products at Salesforce. Started on the Sales Cloud side, and when Chatter came about, I moved to the Chatter team, which then morphed into communities, then onto Service Cloud, and currently I'm in Platform. Of course, you all know this slide, but I think especially today it has a true meaning because pretty much everything we talk about today is forward-looking. None of the things that we talk about have been released yet. We are looking to do a real dev preview later this year and then a pilot. But this is all forward-looking, so please don't make your purchasing decisions on anything you've heard today. So for us, it has been a journey. We've been really working on this idea for a very long time. And the reason was the tools that we have today. So I really thought it might be a good idea I start talking about what are the tools that we have, what are the shortcomings, what are the perceived gaps, and then kind of segue into what do our customers frequently ask for, because things have really changed over the last couple of years. And then we really dive into what's next, what are we currently working on, and I will show you a live demo, and I'm very relieved because as of 2 minutes ago, I wasn't able to get into the demo server. Now I am, so things are good. And then we really move into the vision. And the vision is for us what we consider data integration services. So it goes way beyond data import. It's really about continuous integration of data changes. And then I want to do a quick demo where we are today. We did a lot of work on the back end, so you will see I show you some UX designs, and then you look at the demo, so we're still a little off on the UI. And then one of the key purposes of this session is also to get feedback, to get questions. We also created a group on the communities where I hope to engage with you guys, because it's really about listening to your feedback, to your requirements. Okay, so where are we today? One tool we have is called the Data Import Wizard. We kind of have the challenge that we have to bridge Salesforce Classic as well as the new Lightning experience, so it has always been a stretch. I think we came a long way in the last 1.5 years to really make this tool robust and add additional capabilities. We get about 75,000 imports. Keep in mind, this tool is really designed for ad hoc imports, so there is no scheduled imports. So this is really end users using the tool to import their data. But what are the gaps? And we perceive one gap is that it's tightly coupled with core. Because, I mean, you probably learned a lot today about products that we haven't even considered 2 years ago. So the Salesforce family grew tremendously last year. I think we made over 20 acquisitions. So a data integration solution cannot just solve Salesforce core. We really have to look beyond that and try to provide a solution that helps you integrate with all the Salesforce assets. A big drawback is there is no automation. There's no repeatable processes. There's no scheduled imports. There's limited object support. We have 5 standard objects that we support and then custom objects. But what if you want to import an opportunity, or what if you want to import a case? Today, you cannot do that with the data import wizard. And scalability might also be a challenge. We only support up to 50,000 records. And then, of course, what I just mentioned, it's not extendable to any of the other Salesforce applications, whether it's Commerce Cloud, Marketing Cloud. Now, some of you might know Data Loader. I call it a workhorse because our customers do things with this tool that we have never imagined. It's super robust. I'm trying to think how many releases we had. Customers do about 3 million imports per week. I think that's a really significant number. I think there's only one vendor out there that does more imports, a middleware vendor that does more imports than the Data Loader. So what are the gaps here? As I just mentioned to you earlier, I've been in the cloud for 17 years. Data Loader is not in the cloud. It's software that you install. Suddenly we have to deal, or when I took it over, we had to deal with operating systems, different versions, hardware, all this stuff. So it's really not in our DNA. So it's a little bit of a challenge for us. The UI, yes, we did some refactoring there, but I mean, we had to work in a given framework, and it's really not designed for end users. There's also no out-of-the-box connectivity. Yes, our customers do a lot with command line, but we do not provide any connector framework or the likes. And then same issue here, it's not really extendable to other Salesforce applications. So that's kind of where we are today with tool. Of course, there's also Workbench. There's a large number of middleware partners that provide tools, but these are kind of the key tools that we own, that we have been looking at. So what are you asking for? What do you want? And something that we hear more and more is, oh, I don't want to download or export my data and then import it into Salesforce. What I really want is connected apps. I really want to get away from batch processing and really have a continuous data synchronization. So whenever data changes, I want to have the change either write in Salesforce or write it back to other systems. Folks want to have repeatable processes. This could be a simple batch that runs once a week or every night, or more sophisticated orchestrations. Scale is really becoming more of an issue. Millions of records very often are not enough anymore, especially when you think of day zero scenarios when you have to import a large amount of data. Even with Data Loader, for example, we reach the limits here. And then, of course, more objects and more Salesforce products to support. Customers also repeatedly ask for support of more complex scenarios. I mean, most of our import tools today are really designed to import one object at a time. Yeah, so if you have relationships in between those objects, you, as a user, you have to facilitate, you have to orchestrate, you have to make sure you have the right sequence to, for example, support master detail or lookups or other relationships. I think the biggest challenge we have is the personas that we have to support. We have the end user, for example, a marketing campaign manager who just wants to import leads quickly or synchronize leads quickly and add them to a campaign. And then we have the absolute power user, the admin, that really wants to set up very complex integration scenarios. So we have to be able to support all spectrums. And then last but not least, data quality and deduping, right? make sure that you do not import bad data. Really, how can we provide more tools to make that happen? So that's kind of very high level what customers have been asking for. And we really try to digest all of that and come up with a feasible plan for us. And for us, the mission was really, let's walk before we run. Let's also focus on what my teams know best, and that is data import into Salesforce. So that's kind of the framework that we start with. And that's what we are currently working on. So the idea is really to have repeatable data import processes. Some of the things that you might already do with data loader, with the command line, we want to give you the ability to define what we call integration recipes. So these are predefined definitions, data mapping definitions, business rules, so that you can simply repeat the process. We want to provide the ability to schedule these processes, so there will be a scheduling function where you can define the frequency. Our goal is really for this incarnation of Data Import 3.0 to support all objects in Salesforce initially, and then scale is really key to really go beyond the millions of records. And then, of course, and this is the biggest challenge, as I mentioned earlier, a UI for all the different personas. And last but not least, connected apps. So we will probably start with cloud storage so that you can import files from like a Google Drive, a Box, or similar. Even import a file that might be stored in Salesforce, and then we really want to take it from there and provide more connected apps. So our original goal was really to actually today give all of you a link so that you could sign into the developer preview. Unfortunately, we are a little bit behind the curve, so we are now looking at potentially September. And this will be really basic imports. This is still file-based, but it will use all the new mapping tools and things like that to import data into Salesforce. So really, for us to get very early feedback from the user community, are we on the right track? We have done a lot of user research, but the challenge was, I mean, we have like clickable prototypes, but we really want you to get your hands on this so that you can start playing with it. And then in the December timeframe, we are really planning a full-fledged pilot where you can sign up. And the idea is really here already in the pilot to support all the Salesforce objects, not only to support CSV file upload, but also to enable upload of files that are stored in a cloud storage and potentially already have one connected app. Now, how does this look like? So I want to share with you some of the user experience designs that we have been doing. And it's still an evolving process, because what we also are really working on is that we want to consolidate all the data integration needs across the company so that we have one solution, hopefully, like in Tolkien, one ring to rule them all, one tool to rule them all. It's a big mission. We will see if that happens. But at least we want to listen to all the requirements. And we went through a lot of iterations regarding the user experience. So these are just some examples. And we also look a lot at the Lightning experience, because we also want to kind of stay within the design guidelines here. So this would be the selection screen for the objects that you want to either import or synchronize. We are thinking of making this, for example, a most frequently used or most recently used. We are thinking about giving the admin the ability to also define what's in the top drawer in terms of selection, and then below that you see custom objects as well. So this is really the first step. How would I select my target object in the process? And then this is a shot here of the new mapping screen. And it's very interesting to work on this. Like one key question: should the source be on the left or should the source be on the right? It sounds like a very trivial question, but we went through multiple iterations. How should we represent required fields? How should we communicate errors or warning messages. So we decided for this first iteration to put all the required fields always at the top. And then below that are the optional fields. So you see here already a red, in this case, error messages because it's a required field. You absolutely have to map that field. And then the yellow warning messages are optional fields that you haven't mapped. What you also notice in the top right is a search feature, so that you actually can search within the mapping step. This is a general search within the mapping step. I'll show you a little bit later also how you can search within the mapping step itself. So for those of you who have actually used the data import wizard, this is a feature that we introduced in summer, because imagine you have 600 fields. In the past, we gave you a list alphabetically ordered, and you had to scroll to find the field that you wanted to map. So by simply adding a search capability and the ability to map and unmap within that search dialog is really a tremendous user experience improvement. So we want to move that into the new tool as well. It also has a type ahead, meaning you type in a search string, it kind of immediately shows you what are the hits, and then you can select directly from that list. Now this is still an aspect that we are working on, because we call this basic mapping, because it's really mapping one object to another object. But what if you have multiple objects that you want to map? Because, I mean, all applications have different data structures, so it might be that you have two objects that you want to merge into one object in Salesforce. Or in this example here, you have two fields that you want to concatenate into one Salesforce field. So we're still kind of working here on the exploration. You see this little widget next to first name, last name, so that two fields have been mapped or merged actually into the full name. And then there's also a little dialog box that we are exploring. How can you define how you want to separate? Is it a space? Is it a comma? Is it something else? Now, this is kind of a first exploration around, I'm not just uploading a file from my hard drive. So the top left corner you see, that's my local machine. This is pretty much how you're used to today, whether with Data Loader or with Data Import Wizard. You browse your local hard drive, you pick a file, you upload it. But what if your file is stored somewhere else? I mean, there's a ton of cloud storage providers out there. You might store your files in Salesforce, in Google, Box, or there might be an FTP location that you want to support. So this is how we are thinking how the screen could look like. And then if you select an option, in this case here, Google Drive, then we're actually browsing the location for you and bring it into the screen for you to see what the files are, and then within that screen you select the file that you want to import. Now, of course, think that related to here, if you would have not authenticated this connection, there would be a dialog box popping up that you would actually have to authenticate. So this is really just for the selection. And then, of course, you select the file. In the Data Import Wizard, what we also introduced this summer was the ability to select the delimiter, because sometimes we are very centric on what we need here in the US, and we forgot that in Europe they have a different CSV file format. They use semicolons to separate, not commas. So we brought this also in, and going forward, these are all kind of requirements that we also want to incorporate in this new tool. So these were just some high-level UI designs. I will show you in the demo a little later how it currently looks like, because we did a lot of work on the back end. Because, I mean, we call it data integration service, so it's really a service that you can consume using APIs, that uses APIs to communicate with Salesforce and other systems. So we really invested heavily on the back end first, and now we are building the UI on top of it so that we can expose it to end users. So this is kind of a little bit our mission statement. We want to build open, flexible, and intelligent data integration services and tools that will give us extensibility and scalability. And the key here is really declaratively. So yes, there will be programmatic components, but the idea is really to enable folks with non-development skills to configure the integration. So it's about data integration, data ingestion between Salesforce and, ultimately any external system. And kind of, we're not running out of requirements. It's for us really to infinity and beyond. So we take it step by step. Now, what are some of the key characteristics that we're looking at? As I mentioned, it's really, today we talk a lot about microservices. I still remember the times when we talked about service-oriented architecture, so the services might have gotten a little small, but they're still services. And the goal is really to automate declarative data migration, data integration and ingestion. It's also about export, so not just import. It's also about analysis. It's about transformation. And we also want to go beyond structured data and also want to look at unstructured data. I mentioned already, these jobs should be, you should be able to schedule them. So you have the ability to execute them on demand. You schedule a time and frequency that you want to run them. And then also the third aspect is really, we want to have events that trigger communication. So you probably heard a lot about the event messaging platform and platform events. So similar concept, if there is an event that happens, a change that happens that is relevant to Salesforce, we want to be able to detect it and bring the data in, and vice versa. We collect a lot of data around these import jobs, right? So we also want to be able that you can monitor these jobs and also query the results so that we can also provide some KPIs, some metrics around these integrations. And ultimately, by having this ability, we're also looking at the big task of, can we offer an undo function, right? Many times we do something and then it's like, oh shoot, I did a mistake. How can I quickly click an undo button? But there is no undo button. And then I have to figure out how can I delete all the records that I just created to clean my stuff. The uniform metadata model, this is really about discovering metadata. So with the connector framework, we want to be able to talk to the connected applications, read the metadata, bring it in so that you have that as a foundation for data transformation. We're also looking at a canonical data model so that every integration point should really only have to be mapped once against a canonical model. It's not a new concept, but I feel it's gaining momentum again, and we're definitely on it. And then connector framework. We are really not in the business of building connectors. That's really not our DNA. It's not our core knowledge. There are a lot of companies out there that build these connectors. But what we want to be able to offer is a framework that offers a connector API and a connector SDK that also our partners can leverage to more easily communicate with Salesforce. Or if you want to use it to build your own connector, you can use this framework. This framework needs to support cloud and on-premise. We all talk about the cloud, but when you look at statistics, 70% of the data still are on-premise. So if we need to get to that data, if we need to get to those applications, we also need to have a connector framework that enables us to do that. And then, of course, like I mentioned earlier, we need to be able to really use metadata discovery and discover the capabilities of the applications that we are talking to with this framework. These are three big words: scalable, resilient, and monitorable. We have to be able to support large data sets. We have to support high import throughput. We need to support throttling, we need to support chunking, and when we talk about data streaming, we also need to think about buffering. And another issue that we really have to think more and more, which is not that relevant in the data import scenarios, when you really think about integrations, is automated retries, for example, right? An update fails. Can I provide an automatic retry method? We need to think about error handling, and especially also about configurable alerts so that the admins are getting notified if there's a problem with a data sync, for example. Data formats, I mean, we start with CSV, then we go to XML, JSON, unstructured text, and binary data. And then, I mean, we really need to think about supporting a large variety of data types. And it's also a mission to really think about localization needs, because all our customers are global. So we really need to be able to support different date formats, different character sets, different number formats in all these transformations. So these are some of the key characteristics that we are looking at. And what we are looking to GA summer next year is really, and you notice that the directionality of the arrows has changed. So it's not just leading to Salesforce, it's bi-directional. We haven't 100% agreed yet, should Commerce Cloud be the second Salesforce app that we support, but the framework will definitely support multiple sources and multiple Salesforce targets. And hopefully also the beginnings of the connector SDK. Now this is then really the vision. Originally, we called it the Data Integration Hub at some point. Now we call it Data Integration Service. But the idea is really every participant in a true hub and spoke concept integrates with the hub. And then every consumer can subscribe to data flows from that source application. The hub then manages the orchestration. The hub is basically a separate application framework that resides outside Salesforce core. You see here Oracle and SAP. We're still kind of playing with the idea, are there some key applications that we should support out of the box? That's also an area where we're looking for feedback. Is that something that customers really want? Or is this something where we simply partner or continue to partner with our middleware partners to provide these connectivities? So I hope my demo is still up and running. Tension. Ooh. Okay, so what you see here, this is kind of the main theme that you will find. We really debated about how the look and feel, the overall navigation properties should look like. So we decided for a left-hand navigation menu. There you find all the things you're looking for. If you want to maintain recipes, if you want to set up connections or connectivities, you find the job monitoring for the import jobs. And then when you look at and in this case, I simply show how you import data. So you've seen the screen earlier. It looked much different because, as I mentioned, the UI has not caught up yet with all the work that we've done on the back end. So we need to update this to the latest designs. So here you would simply select the object. And then you would upload a file. And then we move here into mapping, and you see already some of the components that I mentioned. This is the search. What we have not implemented yet is the search within the mapping step. That's currently still in progress. So remember what I mentioned earlier when you have a lot of fields. I mean, here I'm lucky it's not that many. But if it would be a lot, you would have to scroll. You also see how the system changes. So the error messages went away because you have now mapped all the required fields. You also get a green success message here. And then you could continue mapping. And then you get a quick summary, which object you imported, what was the file name, how many records. This is also future exploration here. I've just done all the things that I needed to do to import data. Can I now just simply click save and say, hey, I want to do this again, and save it as a recipe? So that's one very easy step how you can create these recipes. And then, of course, the job executes, and you want to come here into the job monitoring. Again, as an end user, you would probably not see this. As an end user, you would, like today, receive an email notification or an in-app notification that your data has been imported successfully. Good. So as I mentioned earlier, we've created a group on community. It's called Data Integration Services. So if you have any additional questions, want more information, want to kind of engage with us, and also consider maybe being part of the developer preview or the pilot, you can reach out there. We thought it might be the easiest way to really get a group of like-minded folks together to collaborate on this. Now I really would like to move it into Q&A. Do we have microphones for the Q&A? We need runners. Does somebody volunteer to be a runner and get the microphone and then just pass it on? Thanks, Karen. We're right here.
What about multi-object operations with relationships? Obviously, one of the biggest data import challenges that we have.
Yes. I mean, I kind of alluded to it. That's what we call advanced mapping. So we're in the process of designing right now because we also, as I mentioned earlier, we're reaching out to other groups within the company. So I would, from where we stand today, don't expect it to be in V1. V1 will be really focused on what I just showed. It will be relatively simple object structures. But then kind of mid next year, I think we probably want to pilot that because the tool will look very different than this kind of column-based mapping. Okay?
Will this be free or paid version?
Say again?
Will this be free or paid license?
That's a very good question. I would say to be determined. I mean, we want to provide some basic free functionality in any case. I mean, I'm a big believer in, data should flow freely, but that hasn't been determined yet.
When you mentioned one of the service characteristics is resilience and scalability, and you mentioned automatic retries, is that includes the undo? Like if you have a long-running process importing data, when it tries again, does it start from scratch or does it continue where it stopped or it failed?
Very, very good question. I mean, ultimately, you should pick up where you left it. Because like I said, the undo portion is really the challenging part, right? So here it would be really your import fails, and we should remember where we left it off, and then pick it up from there. A retry could, in the easiest incarnation, could simply be I cannot connect to that other application, right? So can I simply retry again? So I think we will also see multiple iterations of this retry capability. Yes.
So how does this play in, like, can I package my recipes? Can I put in source control? Can I include this as
Very, very, very good question. We want to have this packageable because, I mean, in the easiest case, We also look at partners that might want to develop recipes out of the box. You know, in the vision, you saw maybe the link to App Exchange, so we really have that in mind, that you can package them.
Here's a question. I saw that you had an option there to do FTP as FTP.
Yes.
I'm wondering if it would be possible for it to set it up so that it can pick up any file that is as soon as it's dropped and try to apply a recipe to it.
I mean, the way so far we have thought about FTP is that it's not our FTP location. So we will basically poll the FTP location if there is a new file. So if there has to be kind of an event notification that, hey, there is a new file, I mean, that's something we probably have to think about when we talk about the connector, that the connector has the capability. But like I answered the other question, yes, it's on the list, but it's probably not on the top of the list. We will be happy if we can connect to the FTP site, schedule that we can poll that site. That's kind of what's in scope for the first go around.
Hello.
Oh.
Are we? Is someone else asking? Okay. I'm terrible with time. It must have been maybe, 5 years ago now that we were told that the data loader wasn't really getting any additional development, and they started bringing in the Jitterbit data loader and one other vendor as well that they had in setup available. And obviously, there are some really good middleware tools right now that do much more than what you're talking about doing. So I'm curious as to why it seems a little bit like the wheel is being reinvented as opposed to, I know Salesforce doesn't shy away from acquisitions. I'm just curious as to why it seems that we're developing something that's so many years behind some of the tools that exist already.
Very good question. I mean, there are a ton of vendors out there. I mean, we partner with many of them. So originally, we really looked at this more from an internal point of view because these middleware vendors right now, they have to talk, if there are 15 Salesforce products out there, they have to build 15 connectors and build 15 connections. I mean, middleware partners will not go away because like I said earlier, we're not in the business of connectivity. They are doing a great job in providing this magnitude of integrated data sources, JDBC, ODBC, all these very generic connectors. I mean, that's really not where we play. What we simply want is better tools that we can give to our users and that it's easier to partner with middleware vendors. Yes, we are behind the curve. I agree. We've been internally talking about this for quite some time. I still do believe this is a very good thing. Things change. But I think ultimately it's in the best interest of the customer, I hope.
I can't think of the correct term, but will this be compatible with Wave's feature where you have a data set that is going to refresh on a regular basis?
Yeah, very good question. When I talked about the internal discussions, so it was definitely also one intent to make sure that we be aligned with like Wave, with IoT, with Einstein. So, we are working on it. I mean, in the beginning, as the lady pointed out, we're a little bit behind the curve, so we need some time to catch up. So initially, it probably will be parallel, and then we'll see what the future brings. Okay, we have maybe time for one more question.
That's a lot of pressure. So you showed the data import tool at the end and mentioned that you wanted it to have a UI that's good for end users as well, not just for, admins and devs. So you showed that there were some required fields. And is the field requirement only driven by the required attribute on the field itself and by validation rules? Or is there any way to roll in page layout requirements since it's for end users?
I mean, it's a combination. I mean, today we already consider record types, for example, page layouts. We're also thinking of, can the admin define a set of fields that should be included? Should the admin also be able to just define the scope that you never ever see the 600 fields, but only the 15 that you actually want to import? Like, why should I show all of them? So these are all things that we have on the list. and we keep prioritizing. And this is also why we want to engage the community. The more signals we get, right? Because very often the squeaky wheel gets the grease, but that might not necessarily be the feature that everybody needs, right? So this is why we really need feedback. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the show.